Hey guys, back again with another video. It's been a long time since I've done a video. I've just been really busy, and I don't know. It's weird with YouTube. I feel like I just haven't really had the I don't know motivation to do videos. There's a whole lot of reviews I wanted to do and things like that. And I don't know. I just never felt motivated to do it, but. It's game of the year time. I've done a video for every year since I've pretty much started the channel. It's a tradition for me. So I definitely wanted to get this video done. Top 10 games of 2019. And there's not much preamble here. All I'll say before I get into the actual list is I think 2019 is one of my favorite years for video games in a long time. I don't know, a lot of people are down on this year for some reason, but it's one of the best years I can remember. Just in terms of pure variety, there's so many unique experiences I've had this year in many different genres, whether it be some of the AAA games that came out this year or some of the really awesome indie games that came out this year. Um, Not many disappointments. Like previous videos, I'm going to talk about some honorable mentions and dishonorable mentions and disappointing games. Usually, that disappointing games, dishonorable mentions list is pretty big every year for me. This year, it's actually fairly small. And there's plenty of awesome games that I just missed out on this year that I wish I could have played, but I didn't. So yeah, I was very impressed with 2019. Some of my favorite games of all time came out this year. As we start to get my actual top 10. But anyways, enough talking in the beginning. Let's get right into the list here with number 10, and that's Ukulele and the Impossible Lair. A nice surprise for me. So I liked Ukulele. I know a lot of people were down on that game. I thought it was a fine 3D platformer. It definitely had its issues, and I think it got worse towards the end. The whole casino world was just terrible and really tedious. I didn't like that so much, and it was very frustrating in some aspects. It felt kind of dated in some ways, but I still kind of enjoyed it. Controversial opinion, I actually think that game's better than A Hat in Time. I'm probably in an extreme minority for that, but I didn't exactly hate that game. But when they showed the Impossible Lair, I already knew I was going to like it a lot more. They've gone for a side-scrolling platformer for this game in the style of the old Donkey Kong Country games, and it's terrific. One of the cool things about this game, one of the reasons why it ranks on the list and why it's such a unique experience for me is the way it handles the overworld, where it's basically really in depth, where you have like these different hub areas, and you have the levels that that you kind of go into. They're like little storybook kind of icons on the map. But you can solve puzzles in the overworld to actually affect the levels themselves. For instance, one of the levels might be in this like little hole where water keeps rising and lowering. And if the water is fully risen, then that level gets flooded. And if it's not, then the level isn't flooded, and it totally changes what the level is like. And the overworld has really cool, fun puzzles and exploration to it. That didn't really get in the way. The actual levels are extremely well designed. The game has a perfect difficulty balance. Really, the only thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way is the Impossible Lair itself. The final level, where it's like a Breath of the Wild thing, where you can tackle it right in the beginning, but it's extremely difficult. The whole point of the game is to try to get these bees that kind of give you an extra hit in that last level. But even with the max amount of bees, the last level is just unbelievably difficult. It's a 20-minute arduous like slog of a level that I think is just too much for me. I've tried it like 30 times. I've only gotten like halfway through it. Like it's one of the hardest side-scrolling platform levels I've played in ages. I'm trying to slowly chip away at it. Hopefully one day I can finally get through that. But the rest of the game was just so well designed, and it was such a pleasant surprise. And I think the overworld is a really cool thing that I've not seen before in games. And when a game can show me something I've never seen before, something unique like that, I really kind of appreciate it. So Ukulele and Impossible Lair was like such a nice surprise for me for this year. I think it's definitely worth playing if you like side-scrolling platformers, and a huge improvement over Ukulele. Very excited to see what this team at Platonic does next. At number 9 is Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. A lot of you might be surprised it's so low on my list, only at number 9. I'm a huge From Software fan. Dark Souls is my favorite game of all time. The Souls series is one of my favorite series of all time. This game actually just recently won the Game of the Year at the Video Game Awards, actually, which really surprised me. I wasn't expecting that at all. So this is a fantastic game. I don't think it's From Software's best game. It's lacking a lot of the RPG elements that I really appreciate in the Souls games. I don't think the exploration here is quite as good. It's not as rewarding. A lot of the like prosthetic tools that you find aren't very useful in my opinion, and a lot of the items that you find just aren't very exciting. But man, the combat in this game is just absolutely terrific. The way they kind of parrying and blocking and it gets introduced here. And it's just, the combat is so visceral and exciting and thrilling. Some of the best boss battles in a game this year. It's a beautiful game. This art direction is stunning, though I don't quite like it as much as some of the Souls games. I think they have more interesting and varied environments. Yeah, Sekiro, I really enjoyed it. It was grueling at times. I think the difficulty can be a little bit over the top. Some of the boss battles, I think, just have way too many forms. The final boss battle in particular was just like, it was so ridiculous. It took me forever to get through that. It's a really difficult game, far more than the other Souls games, because you don't have a lot of the online elements to kind of help you. Yeah, it's still really impressed me. I was addicted to it like I was with every other Souls game. There's some amazing moments in this game as well. It's just, yeah, it doesn't really rank as highly as the Souls games for me. I definitely prefer that more. Those more are like this is more of a character action game than an RPG really. So yeah, that was maybe a bit of a bummer, but I mean, this is still one of the best games of the year. I mean, the combat is just so good that and it ended up being a pretty memorable game for me. So yeah, we've got Sekiro Shadows Die Twice at number 9. At number 8 is The Outer Worlds. A huge surprise this year. I really wasn't expecting this game to be that good. I don't exactly know why, but I really wasn't. I didn't do a review on this one. Basically, Obsidian made a great Fallout game, far better than Fallout 4. I don't think it's on the level of New Vegas. I don't think the writing is up to that level, but the writing is still really good in this game. It's really humorous at times, but it can also be pretty grim and dark. And I liked how the scale of this game was a lot smaller than something like Fallout. You have these different planets you go to, and they're all pretty small. There's not like a million side quests here, and the side quests that are in this game are all very well written. There's a lot of memorable characters in this game that I really liked. I think the game is probably a little too easy, even on the hardest difficulty. Like eventually, you just start demolishing everything, and it's kind of weird. But I like the character building in this game. I like the skill system as well, where you can kind of spec in different skills. But once you put 50 points into a skill, a certain skill, you can kind of get that higher and max it up to 100. So there's actually a lot of variety with how you want to build your character, which I really liked. The combat itself is probably on the level of something like Fallout 4, but these kind of open world first person RPGs, combat is not really supposed to be this amazing thing. It's one of those games that's, I think, greater than the sum of its parts, I feel. And it's just, I don't know. I think this kind of like open world first person shooter RPG type of game, I don't know, ever since like the Fallout 4. I mean, I liked Fallout 4. It was on my Game of the Year list, but I kind of like that game. I've liked that game less and less since time has gone on. And then you have something like Fallout 76, which was an absolute disaster. So it's nice to see Obsidian kind of go back to their roots in a way. And their games have always had some of the best writings, and that's still the case here, which I really liked. So yeah, Outer Worlds was still a really pleasant surprise for me. It's not like this amazing game. I did 2 playthroughs of it though, so I liked it enough, and I liked how the different choices were different depending on how you want to play your character, which is really cool. But it's not, the choices aren't as crazy as one of the other games on my list that's going to come up a bit later. But I do like how it's not like this illusion of choice like something like a David Cage game. The choices are quite different depending on how you play your character, how you role play your character, essentially. But yeah, another fantastic game from Obsidian. These guys, they're always making great games. It's far less buggy than their previous games, although I've never had a problem with their games in terms of bugs. Even Fallout New Vegas, which I know a lot of people had problems with. That game, I don't know, I had like no problems with that game when I first played it. But yeah, Outer Worlds, definitely one of the best games of the year. At number 7, we have Cadence of Hyrule for the Nintendo Switch. This is another game that kind of came out of nowhere for me. I hadn't played Crypt of the Necrodancer, so this kind of gameplay was a little unfamiliar for me. So Crypt of the Necrodancer is a roguelike, and really I'm not the biggest fan of roguelikes. In fact, I don't think I really like any of them, actually. I've never finished one either. But the cool thing with Cadence of Hyrule is that you can actually finish it. It does kind of have a story, but it still has some roguelike elements. The map is basically going to be different every playthrough you do, and then there's even there's different modes that you can kind of do. As well, and when you die, you lose all your items and things like that. But there is progression, which is I think what kept me hooked. And then of course you have the amazing Zelda music, and the core gameplay I think is just really cool. Where you have to kind of follow the beat of the music, and it's basically the game is kind of takes place on a grid. But it's got like a classic, like original Zelda style map. You go to dungeons, you get items, you fight bosses and things like that. So it kind of has that template, but the actual gameplay is the rhythm gameplay of Crypt of the Necrodancer. And it's really fun, and it's super engaging. It's very difficult in the beginning, but it does kind of get easier towards the end. But yeah, this was one of those games that I just could not put down. I finished this in like 2 sittings. It was incredibly addictive. It's very short. It didn't take me very long to finish. I do actually wish it was actually longer. It probably only took me I think 6 hours at most to finish it. But I was totally engaged the entire time. Just a really creative game, and of course the music. You get these amazing remixes of classic Zelda music that I really appreciated. So yeah, I don't think I would go back to Crypt of the Necrodancer just because that is a roguelike game. But Cadence of Hyrule, I just liked the progression here. I think there was enough that carried over on repeat playthroughs that I thought was really cool. So I can see myself going back to this game. I think it's easily one of the highlights for indie games this year. And if you haven't played it, definitely check it out. I feel like people aren't really talking about it for like Game of the Year discussions, which is a shame because yeah, no, it's some of the most fun I've had with a game this year. Cadence of Hyrule was awesome. At number 5, we have, or actually not number 5, number 6, Fire Emblem Three Houses. So yeah, a fantastic game. I've become a pretty big Fire Emblem fan over the years. Over these past few years, actually, I used to hate the series. Actually, and this game did not disappoint. Okay, so it's got some problems. I do think the school stuff, basically the Persona style elements, while at first they're really cool, and I really liked being like a teacher and kind of setting goals for your classmates and some of the mechanics with that school system. But towards the end of the game, it did start to make the game drag a bit, and I started to actually just skip the school stuff. I thought it actually started to get in the way, and I just kind of wanted to do battles, which was a little unfortunate. I do think the game is a little bloated. I do think it's too long, and I wish I don't know, to get the full story, you do have to kind of play all 3 routes for all the different houses, and the first half of the game is pretty similar on repeat playthroughs. So I never did do a second or third playthrough. I think I just burnt myself out a little bit too much, and that first half of the game is just too similar that I just wasn't into it as much. But that first playthrough was really amazing. It's got the same great strategy RPG gameplay of previous Fire Emblems. The characters are terrific in this game. Some of the best characters I've seen in a Fire Emblem game, and the main story is really good. Dark Fire Emblem has finally gotten a little bit darker again. I feel like the more recent Fire Emblem games are a lot more like humorous and kind of cheerful. They don't have like the dark storylines of some of the older ones, from what I've heard. I haven't played a lot of the older ones, but I've heard like Path of Radiance, for instance, of Radiant Dawn are pretty dark. And this game, it can get quite dark at times. I was kind of surprised. But yeah, no, I was really engaged with like the storyline in Three Houses. And then just the character building in this game is just phenomenal. Like with previous Fire Emblem games, I really enjoyed kind of making my ultimate team, and the class change system in this game was actually really cool. And I love how it's kind of integrated with the school system, where you're teaching your students. I thought that was really cool. And just towards the end of the game, you've kind of done everything. Eventually, your characters are going to be maxed out, so the school stuff is not really much of a benefit, and it just gets in the way for me. But still, overall, Fire Emblem Three Houses, I really loved it. I was super addicted to it. I could not put this game down for like the first 30 hours. Like, it was insane. Like, I was just like so fucking into it. But I think when I first played this, it was just like a game of the year. Like, this is like the top for me. But as we've gotten towards the end of the year and I've thought about it, it is a flawed game. It's not perfect. I think I might even prefer Fire Emblem Conquest, which is kind of crazy. A lot of people would probably disagree with me on that, but still, Three Houses was definitely a great game, and definitely one of the best RPGs that you could play in 2019. At number 5 is Control, and wow, this was a huge surprise for me. This game came out of nowhere. I've always been a big fan of Remedy's games. In fact, I don't think I've disliked any of their games. I haven't played Quantum Break. I still need to play that. But yeah, I feel like Control just kind of is like this dark horse game. It's gotten a lot of Game of the Year awards already. IGN gave it their Game of the Year, which really surprised me. But yeah, I love this game. I think this game was amazing. It might be my favorite game from Remedy, or at least their best game since Max Payne 2. One of the best things about this game is its world building. It's just phenomenal. I really enjoyed like picking up collectibles and reading everything and getting more from the lore in this game, which I find a lot of games collectibles are so meaningless and so irritating and just like to add nothing to the game. But in Control, they really added to the world. And the world is just fascinating. It's got a very engaging narrative, some really awesome characters. Dr. Darling is just amazing. The writing, as with most Remedy games, is top-notch. I really enjoyed the writing, but the combat in this game is thrilling. I love the combat. Remedy's games, I've always really liked the combat. Some really great like third-person shooting that just feels good. It feels good to like damage enemies in this game and kind of run around these environments using kind of force powers, like picking up stuff in the environment and throwing it at enemies and doing like dodge rolls. And then there's a later ability that I don't really want to spoil that really changes things up. Some really interesting boss fights and optional content in this game that I really enjoyed. And then you have a set piece moment later in the game that I don't want to spoil. That is probably one of the most memorable parts in any game I've played this year. The things they do with visuals is really cool, and the art direction in this game is amazing too. It really kind of adds to this world and kind of like supernatural setting that they've got going on. Some really creepy moments in here as well. It looks fantastic. The game looks amazing. Some people really have issues with this game. Apparently on the base PS4, it runs like garbage. The frame rate's not that good. I played on a Pro, and there was some dips here and there, but it wasn't too bad. I thought it was playable kind of throughout, but I think they've kind of updated it and they've fixed it a little bit. I think the performance is a little better now, but I still think it's not ideal, which is a bit unfortunate. It's the perfect length. It's not a bloated game. Even getting the Platinum only took me like 15 hours, and I really enjoyed doing all the optional stuff. It's a very tight, compact experience that never really wastes your time. The difficulty I thought was like just right for me. Some of the bosses were fairly tricky, and some of the combat arenas could get kind of difficult, but it never got frustrating to me, and it never felt too easy for me as well. Just overall, just a really well-designed game. It's even got a Metroidvania thing going on where you kind of revisit previous areas. That part of the game is maybe a bit less successful. I'm not 100% sure it needed to be a Metroidvania. I don't think it adds like a whole lot to the game. That might be one of the weaker elements. I kind of like the upgrade system as well. Some of the weapons seemed a bit useless in the beginning, but as I experimented more, I found each of them had their uses, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, no, Control was a huge surprise for me. I also played it right after a game that I thought was really disappointing, so that I think had a bit of an effect as well. But when I really think on it, yeah, no, Control was just one of the best surprises of this game. And as someone that doesn't really play a lot of shooters, third person or first person, it just was just nice to play a game that a game where the shooting felt fantastic. I just think that's very rare for me for games. So yeah, Control definitely one of my highlights of 2019. At number four, we have the Resident Evil 2 remake. Very early in the year, and still one of the best games. This game blew me away. It's incredible. I played Resident Evil 2, the original game, for the first time. I think like last year or no, it was last year. It was last year, and that game quickly shot up to one of my favorite games of all time. Certainly one of my favorite survival horror games. I think that game's amazing. I still think it's worthwhile to play. I think this remake is very different. But basically, they both have their own successes, I feel. But yeah, this was just an amazing survival horror experience. It looks fantastic. The audio design is amazing. Mr. X is a fantastic addition that adds so much tension. And even after like 6 playthroughs of this game, it was still actually like giving me anxiety because he could just come from nowhere, and so many memorable moments from this game came from encounters with him. I played this game so much I eventually like got into like speed runs of it. To get the platinum trophy, you actually got to basically speed run the game and play on the hardest difficulty, which I think really kind of makes you see how smartly designed the game is. Playing on the hardest difficulties was actually a really enjoyable experience for me. So they streamline things without kind of ruining the atmosphere and tension that the original game has. It's a very exciting game. It's the shooting in it is maybe not like the greatest. It doesn't feel like as amazing as something like Resident Evil 4, which I played again this year as well. That game holds up so well, but it's still pretty good. There's a lot of good weapons in this game. Really, it's the level design in this game that I think kind of. I love the most the level design, and then combining that with the inventory system, because they went back to that classic inventory system where you really got to think about what you're carrying with you, and you really got to think about how you want to plan out your routes in this environment. And I always love that, and I think the level design in this game is just extremely smart and thoughtful. And every playthrough of this game felt different from the last, and kind of memorizing these environments and kind of planning out your routes for some of the harder difficulties was really satisfying to me. It's extremely enjoyable as well. Has an amazing atmosphere. It's terrific. Capcom really outdid themselves with this remake. Capcom has been on fire this year in general. They did a lot of great stuff this year. But I think this is one of their best games, and well, not really, because Monster Hunter World was my game of the year last year. Capcom's just killing it. They're just absolutely killing it. We've got the Resident Evil 3 remake coming next year, which I mean, I'm sure it's gonna be great. Because Resident Evil 2, this remake, this is the best Resident Evil game since Resident Evil 4, actually. I'd go that far. Really amazing. Definitely one of the best games of the year. An early game came up very early, but still one of the best. All right, number 3, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Another surprising game for me. I really wasn't expecting this game to be nearly as good as it is. It borrows a lot from Symphony of the Night. It's very similar. A lot of the music even almost sounds identical to some of the tracks in Symphony of the Night. It's not an innovative game or anything like that. It really does take from the Symphony of the Night template. It's one of those classic Igavania type experiences, but I actually think it's probably one of the best ones. I enjoy this more than any of the DS Castlevanias, any of the GBA ones I've played. Obviously, it's not on the level of Symphony of the Night, which is one of the best games ever made, but it's close. And I think this game does make some cool additions to the formula. I really loved the familiar well, not the familiar system. What did they call it? It wasn't the spirit system. It's been so long since I played it, but it's basically all the collectibles you get from the different enemies that kind of give you different abilities. Shards, that's it, the shards. That I thought was a really cool mechanic, and I loved experimenting with them, and I loved how each enemy type would drop a different shard. It's crazy, and it was really fun experimenting with them. The level design was fantastic. I really loved the exploration in this game. It was super addictive. I couldn't put this fucking game down. Like I just got so obsessed with it, which I really liked. Really cool optional content and bosses that I really admired. I really loved the visual design in this game too. I think it actually looks great. It plays great. It's very fast and fluid. It's just a really refined, excellent game of this formula, of this classic Metroidvania type experience, and it really surprised me because I've been looking forward to it, but I think a lot of the impressions around it, even ever since they started showing gameplay late into the Kickstarter, I think people were a little down on it and weren't expecting it to be that good. And I don't think people are talking about this game in Game of the Year talks, but this to me is one of the most purely enjoyable games I played this year, from start to finish. Really, there's not much about it that I didn't like. The only thing I could really say is it's probably too easy. I don't think it's a particularly difficult game, but Symphony of the Night is not a particularly difficult game either. And I don't know, really, when a game is too easy or too easy, it's never really that big of a deal to me. But there still are some optional bosses that did give me a challenge. But Bloodstained just really impressed me. I think this is one of those games that a lot of people are not going to really consider for Game of the Year. I probably liked this game more than most people did. But I think a big element of that is the surprise. I don't know, really was not expecting it to be one of the best Kickstarter games. But I guess you gotta kind of trust Igarashi. I mean, this guy, he's made so many games before and a lot of classic games. So I guess it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that they really delivered on what they promised here. But amazing. Love Bloodstained. All right, so we're down to the top two, and both these games are some of my favorite games of all time. I think these top two are two of the best games I've ever played. And number two, we've got Disco Elysium, a game I really wish I reviewed because this is a masterpiece. It's a goddamn masterpiece. So it's already won a ton of awards. It got the most amount of awards at the Game Awards, and I'm glad that more people are going to play this game because of this. Unfortunately, it is a PC-only game at this moment, and I think that's why a lot of people haven't played it. It is coming to consoles, though, next year, so that should hopefully improve its like, people are going to play it more, essentially. So this game came out of nowhere as well. It got amazing reviews, and when I looked into it, I was like, oh fuck, I have to play this. This game seems so up my alley. So it's kind of a point-and-click adventure game, RPG as well. It's definitely an RPG, where you've kind of got these, like, it's almost not really isometric, but it's kind of top-down in a way, where you're kind of clicking on the environments to move your character and you're talking to people. It can feel like a visual novel at times. There's a lot of reading in this game, so first I gotta mention the writing in this game. This is probably the best part of this game. Disco Elysium is the best written game I've ever played. And no hyperbole there, I truly believe that. I've never been so impressed with the writing in a game. It's humorous, it's dark, it's cynical, it can be nihilistic at times. It's extremely political and self-aware. It's probably one of the more political games I've played. And this game I learned things because of this game, and I looked into different things because of this game. There was parts of this game I even confused by, but it made me want to go and research different things. It's very, very socially aware. It's very social. It's got it's a very social political game. It's got a lot of things on its mind. It tackles themes that I've never really seen games tackle before, and it's got so many layers to it. It's kind of crazy, and the way you can build your character is insane. There's so many different options and ways to kind of build your character, but at the same time, the main character in this game, he has certain character traits that kind of. It's not like you're playing yourself totally in this game, but basically, I mean, because I didn't do a review of this game, I kind of have to talk about how this game plays. In the beginning, you kind of choose different character traits that you have, different skills. Essentially, there is a skill system in this game, but the way the skill system works in this game is just absolutely amazing and incredibly innovative. Uh, like Man, it's kind of hard to talk about it in this way because I do want to talk about a review of this game. I can't talk about this game endlessly here, but you basically choose different skills you want to kind of spec in, and it's absolutely brilliant. The way this game kind of uses the skill system, where you'll talk with people and you have different dialogue choices. And basically, man, it's almost hard to explain. It's actually like I can't really go in depth here because it would actually take me like a long time to talk about it. But this game integrates dialogue choices and skills in a very creative way. This game has skill checks. You're kind of doing dice rolls to determine how different actions will play out. And that's all determined on the skills you choose in the beginning. When you level up in this game, you kind of put points into your different skills essentially, and that will improve your chances of successful skill checks later in the game when you're talking to characters. There's no combat in this game. I should say that's one of the crazy things too. No combat, and basically things that might seem like they would be combat encounters are all determined by dice rolls. This game is all dialogue and choice driven. But one of the crazy things in this game really is how different the choices affect things. So things you'll do in the beginning of the game and dialogue choices you make in the beginning of the game and how you talk to certain characters in the beginning of the game are going to have extreme ramifications on later events and later characters you talk to. One of the things that really impressed me about this game is the way it calls you out on your choices. So one of the early examples with this game that I thought was extremely impressive. There's this racist character that you'll meet very early on. Well, it actually really depends on how much you explore these environments, which is again one of the amazing things about this game. But this racist character, you're trying to get some information out of him. And when I first met this character, obviously I was like, fuck this character. So he's spouting off all this racist bullshit to me. So I called him out on it. I'm like, fuck you, dude. You suck. Stop being racist, right? So obviously he hated me because of that, right? So that was the end of it, right? I was like, okay, I don't want to deal with this character anymore. So later in the game, you get kind of a side quest where it's a benefit to kind of get some information out of him. And this game, one of the best things about it with these side quests, many different ways to tackle them, many different ways to complete them, depending on how you build your character, really. So I come back to this racist character later, and I choose the dialogue option to kind of agree with his racist ideology, just to get some information out of him. And the game called me out on this, that because of the earlier conversation way back in the beginning, this racist character was like, "Hey, you're not fooling me. You're not fooling me. You don't agree with what I say. Fuck you. Get out of here." And that was it. I couldn't talk to him anymore. Like, he just flat out denied me because of my earlier conversations with him, because of the way I acted towards him before. So that's the kind of shit that happens constantly in this game. And I thought, like, when that moment happened, there's a bunch of moments in this game where I was just like, wow, they actually remembered that. They actually remembered how I played my character. And it's just the way you play your character completely forms your experience with this game, and it forms the way other characters talk to you. So many different amazing characters in this game, too. One of my favorites, Kim Kitsurugi, your partner, because I didn't even talk about the story in this game. You're a detective essentially, and you're basically solving a murder in this. It's basically like an alternate not really a history, alternate world in this game. which I can't really talk about that. That's this whole thing. The world building in this game is fucking incredible. The way they build upon this world and how invested you get into this world and how just depressing it is. The music's amazing too, I must say. It's got amazing visuals to it as well. Like, I don't know if I'm really selling this game enough. I feel like this game you do have to do a review on. I do have to do a review on, but in terms of its role playing, its elements, its choices that you make. Also, the game, the main story in this game is incredibly engaging, but the side stories are amazing too. The characters are so much depth to these characters. That just blew me away, and just the dialogue in this game is just amazing too. Like, oh my god, like so much amazing, like, layered dialogue, some really hilarious moments, some sad, depressing moments in here as well. But the RPG elements are amazing too. Like, it is an RPG, definitely, with how you build your character. It's just not very traditional in a lot of ways. It's very surprising in a lot of ways. But I don't know. I hope I'm selling this game a little bit. It's one of those games that's really hard to kind of describe. You really got to play it for yourself. But it's extremely innovative, and it's one of the most memorable experiences I've had this year. I can't wait to play it again. I played like the first hour again, and it was insane how different it was. Depending on the skills I chose in the beginning and depending on the dialogue choices that I made, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy how different repeat playthroughs are probably going to be with this game. So I can't wait to play it again when it's on PS4. It's brilliant. This game is fucking brilliant, and I implore everyone to please play it. It's not a demanding game. You don't need like a crazy PC to play this game either. If you want to wait for the console ports, that's fine. I totally understand that, especially as someone that doesn't really play PC games that much. But this is one of the best games I've ever played, flat out. It's certainly the best indie game this year. And it really kind of bugged me that it wasn't nominated for Game of the Year. Just because it's not a AAA game, it doesn't get nominated for Game of the Year. I'll never understand that. But Disco Elysium, just a fucking amazing game. Definitely play it. I just spent 10 minutes talking about this game that's actually only number 2 on my list. But Disco Elysium. And that, of course, brings us to number 1, my Game of the Year for 2019. Probably not a surprise if you've been following my Twitter. Disco Elysium was actually my number 1 for a while. But going for the platinum in this game has convinced me that it's my Game of the Year, and that's Death Stranding. Already sort of a divisive game. I mean, I think most people tend to like it, but there's a lot of haters out there. There's a lot of people that think this game is just absolute garbage, and it's fascinating. So, Death Stranding is probably one of the most fascinating, original, weird-ass AAA games I've played in forever. This fucking game, already one of my favorite games of all time. I think it's Kojima's best game. I think it's better than any of his games I've played. But at the same, it's interesting. Okay, this game is crazy. I think this game's got a lot of problems. I think it's got a lot of issues. I think the narrative in Death Stranding is garbage. A lot of people love it. I think it's just absolutely overindulgent, pretentious, and just a lot of absolute nonsense. I think the story, by the end of it, you do understand it. It's not like nonsensical. I just think it's silly and over the top and stupid. It's stupid. I think that's one of the main things for me. It's dumb. It's dumb, and a lot of people might find it like gloriously dumb, and they might appreciate how stupid it is. For me, I couldn't get past it. I think the dialogue in this game is extremely cheesy and just like really like there's so many moments in this game where I'm just like, are you serious? Are you fucking serious with this dialogue? Some of the characters, I do like some of the characters. Mads Mikkelsen's character I do like his arc in the game. I think that's probably one of the more memorable things about the storyline here. I do like a lot of the world building in this game. I think a lot of the world building is pretty interesting. Even though a lot of the emails and interviews you find are kind of boring to read. But yeah, the narrative just didn't really engage me, and by the end of it, I was just getting annoyed with it, actually. I think it really starts to fall apart towards the end, too. But I think it really starts to fall apart at the first time you visit Hartman's lab. I'm not going to spoil it, but that's the part of the game where I was like, okay, fuck this. This is just, I don't like this at all. So, okay, so why is this game my game of the year? I fucking hate the story in this game. Like, but it's still my number one. And that's the gameplay. The gameplay in this game is, it's, I've never played anything like this. I, like, this entire game, I'm playing it, I'm like, wow, this game is doing things I've never seen before. Kojima likes to say it's a new genre. I don't know if I'd go that far. It certainly does have an open world template to it, but the way traversal works in this game and the way the online elements work in this game is unlike anything I've seen before. It's incredibly unique, and I think this game is going to have an impact on games in the future. I think this is going to be a game that's talked about for years to come, and I think a lot of developers are going to borrow from this game. A lot's been said that you are a cargo delivery guy in this game. You're basically delivering cargo across this giant open world and kind of connecting this chiral network. You're connecting all these facilities together and kind of building this broken world, as it were. And one of the big things with this game is the traversal, and it's incredibly unique, incredibly exciting and thrilling. Frustrating at times, yes, but ultimately very memorable. And there's many different aspects to traversal. I can't get into review mode here, but I do want to spend at least 10 minutes talking about the positive, amazing aspects for this game. And I mean, the traversal is this first thing. So the environment in this game is very treacherous, and a lot of times you'll have to be delivering a lot of cargo to different places. There's many different ways to do this, and this is one of the more thrilling things about this game is planning out your routes. And there's a lot of variety here. You might be taking on different orders at once and going to different locations at once. And one of the most exciting things about this game is kind of planning out your routes. Okay, which place do I want to go to first? How do I want to chart this out? I'm going to make some waypoints to get to where I need to go. What cargo do I want to bring with me? What tools do I want to bring with me? What tools do I want to build? Do I want to use people's online ladders and bridges and roads to kind of get to these locations? Do I want to use a vehicle? Do I want to use certain cargo on certain vehicles and carry some cargo? All these choices you have to think about. All these things you have to think about. And it's amazing. So many memorable moments in this game. Off the top of my head, the mountain region in this game I think is amazing. Making zip lines and kind of like making zip lines to kind of chart out this region. One of my most memorable experiences was delivering cargo to this place, like in the middle of nowhere in this snowy mountain. I'm going through this mountain. It's blizzard, it's like this crazy blizzard's going on. I can't see shit. I've got so much cargo with me. I'm constantly losing balance. I'm constantly trying to figure out like where the fuck I'm going. How am I going to get to this place? I'm climbing these crazy mountains. I'm like, I don't have many materials with me. I'm running out of time. It sounds frustrating, yet it was extremely memorable and exciting and thrilling to me to think like, oh, am I gonna even fucking make it? How am I gonna get here? How am I gonna do this? I eventually did succeed, and it was just, it was so like memorable to me and unique. The online elements to this game are fucking crazy. So it takes the Dark Souls online elements and kind of really builds upon them. And one of the things I like about this game is the shared positivity. Everyone's kind of working with each other without actually being a co-op experience to kind of make this world a bit less treacherous, to make it easier for you to get to point A to point B. It's so fucking satisfying seeing the roads in this game being built from other players. You're kind of like contributing materials to kind of get these roads built in different parts of the environment. People will make bridges to kind of like make the environment easier to navigate. And you can do this yourself. Basically, if you create a bridge or a ladder or something like that, it will appear in other people's worlds. And I think that shared online element is one of the most fascinating things about this game, especially later in the game when you get the zip lines and when you start using zip lines to kind of get around these environments and connect them, and you see another, and you're building this zip line network, and then another player's zip line just happens to connect perfectly to the zip line that you've put on like this that's super high mountain. Man, the online elements in this game are just amazing and so fucking satisfying. That those moments when you see another player's bridge, for instance, that just happens to be in the perfect place for you to get your cargo to a certain location that you're going to. It's brilliant. It's fucking brilliant. The traversal in this game is so fucking amazing. I love the way this game controls and just the way the different weights of cargo are going to affect how you move. The floating carriers are really fucking cool. Like, there's so many different cool tools and abilities you'll get in this game that I just absolutely fucking adored. I'm going for the platinum now. I'm leveling up all the facilities to level 10, and I'm still just absolutely loving the core gameplay loop in this game. I don't know if I've sold it well enough. I'm not trying to do a review here, but the gameplay in this game it's incredible. It's fucking incredible, and it never got old to me. From the very beginning of the game all the way to the end, it never got old. There's also combat in this game. There's like mule camps that you have to get by sometimes. There's the BTs that I didn't even mention that had a whole other dimension to the gameplay that I can be frustrating at times, but ultimately I grew to appreciate. The combat in this game is not amazing. The stealth in this game is not amazing. But I still think it adds to the experience overall. Anyways, I can't talk too much about this game. I mean, I could do a whole like an hour-long video about on this game, singing its praises and trying to explain to people why you need to play this game. It's unlike anything I've played before. It blew me away. It fucking blew me away. Death Stranding is just, I don't know, it's something different. It's flawed. It can be frustrating. I don't like the narrative. Ultimately, though, it ended up being the most memorable game of the year for me, and it's doing things I've never seen before, and I think that's something to be admired. It's a hell of a game, and it's been interesting to see the reactions to it. It's not going to be for everyone. No, it's not going to be for everyone. I was a bit worried when the reviews came in and it was getting some negative reviews that I wasn't going to like it. And just on a surface level, it sounds like something that shouldn't be good, yet ends up being this amazing transformative experience. Death Stranding, my game of the year for 2019, one of the best games I've ever played. And play it. It might not be your cup of tea, but I definitely want everyone to at least give this game a try. I think it's one of the most important games I've played in quite some time. All right, so that's my top 10 for the year. So now let's get to the honorable mentions, dishonorable mentions, disappointing games, games I've missed for the year, all that good stuff. So let's start with the honorable mentions. We'll start with Kingdom Hearts 3. Now, Kingdom Hearts 3 has gotten a lot of hate, and I guess from a lot of like diehard fans, but also people that aren't terribly into Kingdom Hearts as well. Kingdom Hearts 3, the story's garbage, it's nonsense. I've never liked the story in the Kingdom Hearts games, the lore and all that stuff. It's just been always ridiculous to me. But, I don't know, I liked the combat in Kingdom Hearts 3. Yeah, it was pretty easy. There wasn't a whole lot of depth to it, but I thought it was pretty flashy and it was fun. And I liked exploring the Disney worlds. And the Pirates of the Caribbean world was just fucking awesome. Like, that alone, I think, made the game worthwhile for me. Like, I just thought that was so much fun. Going through that world on your ship, getting all the treasure, like that was just great. I really had a fun time getting the platinum in that game, doing all the optional content. Not enough to make my top 10, but I definitely didn't hate that game the way so many people do. A lot of people think the game's like just one of the worst games ever. I'm just like, I don't know. I still like the game, but at the same time, I'm not like this massive Kingdom Hearts fan. It's much better than the first game too. I don't know why people like the first game so much. I think that game's really dated and kind of clunky. The third game is much better as far as like gameplay goes. Kingdom Hearts 2 is still my favorite of the ones I've played, but I still like Kingdom Hearts 3. I definitely like the game. Anthem, again, one of those games that a lot of people hated, and with good reason. I don't think this is a particularly great game. I did get it for free, though, and I think that probably helped. helped its case. I thought it was a decent like looter shooter, like one of those Destiny style games. The flight was really awesome. Like flying around felt really fantastic, and the actual shooting I thought felt really good. The loot was maybe a little unexciting, and there was a lot of grindy moments to it. The story is absolute fucking garbage. Like that whole part, the part of the game was bad. That's probably one of the more disappointing things coming from BioWare. But I mean, BioWare hasn't been good for a long time now. But I don't know, Anthem I liked playing with other people. Like if I was playing by myself, yeah, it probably wouldn't have been as fun. But I finished the game. I finished like the 30-hour campaign. I don't know. I kind of had fun with Anthem. I didn't think it was like the worst thing ever. It's probably a fairly mediocre game. I wouldn't recommend anyone go out and play it unless you can find it for like $5. But I don't think I think it can be. It's probably maybe a disappointing game, but I don't think it's definitely not one of the worst games I've played. I think there's far actually worse games I've played this year than Anthem. But it was a disaster for BioWare as far as like sales go, and apparently rumors are they're kind of trying to reinvent it. We'll see with that. I don't know. I don't think I would ever go back to the game, but it does suck that BioWare has been in this like rut for a while now. I hope they can get back to like how they used to be. But moving on to Devil May Cry 5, and now this is a game that's going to be on a lot of people's top 10s. A lot of people just absolutely fucking love this game. I liked it. I really enjoyed Devil May Cry 5. I really enjoyed my playthrough of it, but I don't know. It didn't grab me enough to want to go back and do repeat playthroughs on other difficulty levels. I've never really been into like the story and the characters all that much in the Devil May Cry series and things like that. So that part of the game wasn't terribly exciting to me. I liked switching between the characters, and the different characters' playstyles were really cool, I thought. And the combat is amazing. Like that is the best part of the game. The combat, it's some of the best combat in a video game this year. But the level design I thought was kind of just eh. And a lot of people will say Devil May Cry is not really known for its level design, but I don't know. I think Devil May Cry 1 and 3 actually have really good level design. The way it's like kind of like a singular location with like backtracking. Devil May Cry 5 is definitely a lot more a linear game. It's probably comparable to like Devil May Cry 4, but even more so than that, Devil May Cry 4 had some like some puzzles and different things that kind of different things to kind of add variety. Like Devil May Cry 5 is just like going through corridors mostly, not much room for exploration, which was kind of a bummer. I like stick in games. So I don't know, maybe that was a big part of it, why the game didn't really stick with me the way it does for a lot of other people. It was probably still close to making the list. Like it'd be like number 12 or 13 or something. It's still a very good game. I would definitely recommend people play it if you like action games. Moving on, Katana Zero, a cool little indie game that came out this year. Reminds me of like a side-scrolling Hotline Miami. I talked about this on the channel at some point. It's got a really cool visual style to it. Surprisingly engaging story. I wasn't expecting to like the story as much in Katana Zero, but I really did dig it. Very challenging, of course, going for that Hotline Miami kind of thing. It's also one of those games that's like challenging, yes, but every time you die, you never lose much progress, and you're immediately thrown back into the action. I love how a lot of like indie games that are trying to be really challenging go for that kind of thing and don't really actively waste your time. I really love that. Yeah, very enjoyable. I didn't like the ending so much. It's one of those like cliffhanger type endings, which kind of sucks. It's a very short game too, but yeah, definitely enjoyable. Just not quite enough to kind of get on the top 10 there. Next, we've got Monster Hunter Iceborne. I probably wouldn't count this anyways. It's just an expansion to my favorite game from last year. It's great. It adds basically the G rank to the game. Plenty of more monsters to fight, a new location, tons of new weapons and armor. It kept me, it added another like 30 hours to my Monster Hunter World playtime. And just was like a super like full-fledged like expansion to the game that I really loved going through with friends. And I'm still kind of chipping away at it. I haven't done exactly everything in it yet. But yeah, Monster Hunter World continues to be one of my favorite games ever. Certainly one of my top 10 games of the decade, that's for sure. Link's Awakening, a remake. I don't know, this is like in the same category as Resident Evil 2, but I think this is a bit less successful of a remake. They didn't change really a whole lot here. Link's Awakening, I gotta say I was a little disappointed with. I think the original game's actually better. Like there are some definite improvements here. Like being able to not go into the inventory constantly to switch your items is pretty nice. Like having your sword and shield on buttons is pretty great. But the stuff that they did add to the remake I thought was kind of shitty. Like the dungeon maker was like awful, and the fact that they tied like heart pieces to it was just like not fun. Like I was planning to 100% the game, and that just completely stopped me dead in my tracks. Like I hated the dungeon maker in that game. The frame rate is kind of spotty, and it slows down a lot, despite how great the visuals are. The music is way worse than the original. I kind of hate what they did with the music. And it's still a Game Boy game at its core. They didn't really change a whole lot to the game, even though Link's Awakening is a pretty well designed game overall. I enjoyed it, but I don't know. I feel like as a remake, it's not entirely successful, other than a few like accessibility things that they kind of added. If you're gonna play Link's Awakening, honestly, it seemed to be in the minority here, but I would honestly recommend just paying like the $5 and getting it on the eShop on the 3DS. I don't know. I think it's a tighter, more enjoyable experience, like the original game. That's one of those disappointing. It's still an honorable mentions because I still did enjoy it. I mean, it's Link's Awakening. Like, come on, it's not that bad. Ring Fit Adventure is a game I wish I played more of. I played like a demo of it for a decent amount of time. That game's actually really fucking cool. I didn't know it was like a turn-based RPG, but like a fitness game. And your attacks are basically different like fitness routines, essentially. And you're even doing like fitness like actions to kind of like dodge attacks, like a Mario RPG style battle system. Really, really fucking cool. And you can kind of like increase the difficulty, and you're leveling up your character and everything like that. I was very impressed by it. That's kind of one of those games that if I owned it, I'd probably actually really get into it and do it like 30 minutes a day, and probably get more into fitness than I am right now. But I don't know, it's kind of expensive. It hasn't gone down in price just yet. That's one of those games I might pick up at some point. I feel like Ring Fit Adventure, if I really played it more, I bought it and got into it, it would probably make my top 10 list. I think that game is actually really cool. I definitely try to like get your hands on that game, like a demo of some kind, because it's way better than you would expect. Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I played a Call of Duty game for the first time in years. I think the last one I played was like World at War. That's a long time ago. I didn't touch the multiplayer or the was it zombies? I can't remember what the other mode was. I think there's like a co-op mode in there, Spec Ops or something like that. I didn't touch that, and none of the multiplayer I touched because I hate multiplayer, especially competitive multiplayer. But the campaign I went through. It's not terrible. I mean, the story is awful, and then the way they kind of portray the U.S. is pretty awful. Like this American war crime is portrayed as, oh, the Russians. It was actually all the Russians. That was kind of gross, all that stuff. But the actual like level design and like the combat itself, like the gunplay, it's not too bad. There's one level later in the game where you're like sneaking around like these little like this massive environment and kind of like picking off all the enemies one by one. I thought it was really fun, actually. Not an amazing game. Definitely not an amazing game. It's fine. I enjoyed it far more than I expected to. But I think I'm good with Call of Duty. I don't think I need to play another one for maybe another like 10 years or something. That's one of those games that I borrowed from a friend. I would never actually pay for something like that. Pokemon Sword and Shield. I really enjoyed Pokemon Sword and Shield. This was very close to making my top 10. I think it's probably one of the better Pokemon games in a long time. I like how it's very little fluff to it. A lot of these recent Pokemon games have been way too story heavy, throwing like constant dialogue in your face and kind of interrupting you constantly. This game just lets you go for it. Just take on the gyms and get your Pokemon. The wild area I thought was really cool. Fighting like higher level Pokemon than you really should be. The game was pretty snappy and well paced. It's got one of the problem a lot of the recent Pokemon games have, where the Pokedex is way too large, so that collect 'em all aspect of it is just not engaging like it was in Pokemon Let's Go, where you only had 151. I much preferred that, but it's mechanically a much more in-depth game than that. I don't know. I enjoyed it. It's not, it's not the most amazing game. Like I didn't think it was like the best thing ever. I kind of burnt out a little bit on it towards the end. By the time I got to like the 7th or 8th gym, I was like, okay, I've kind of had my fill of this, and then I don't know. It started to kind of lose its appeal a bit. compared to like the beginning of the game. But definitely, I still definitely enjoyed it. I always say I'm never going to get the next Pokemon game, and I always do. So maybe there's something about the series that does keep me coming back. Maybe it's that childhood nostalgia that I have for Red and Blue, and Pokemon Blue being such an important game for me. But yeah, no, I did enjoy the new Pokemon games. What else do we have here? I guess. Oh yeah, these. I think that's all the honorable mentions actually. Yeah, we're kind of onto the games I've missed category and like kind of dishonorable mentions. I guess so. Star Wars Fallen Order. I'm actually playing that right now. So I didn't finish it in time to make the to make the top 10, but I don't think it would make my top 10 based on like the 5 hours I've played so far. It's definitely enjoyable. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. I haven't actually seen a Star Wars movie since Episode 7. I have no interest in the new one either. I just don't like Star Wars that much, to be honest. But so the story in this game is not really doing much for me, but the combat's fun. It's like Dark Souls light combat. It's fun, like reflecting the enemy's shots back at them. It feels like weighty and pretty satisfying. The game's surprisingly difficult, which I like. The level design, it's weird. It's got like a Metroid Prime style map. There's some backtracking. You'll get like abilities that you'll get later to go back to previous environments and get collectibles and things like that. It's a pleasant, fun game to play. It's got that terrible Uncharted climbing that in it, at least in the beginning. It might get more advanced later, but that stuff I'm not so into. It's one of those games that's very derivative. It takes a lot from other games, and it's not like the best in class at all of these different things. It's very much a jack of all trades, master of none kind of game. It's enjoyable though. I like it so far. I'm sure I'll see it to the end, but it's definitely not top 10 material unless something like radically changes. But I don't see it really. It is better than I was expecting though. Yeah, so I guess we'll do the games I've missed category. A lot this year. A lot I wish I could have played, but it's hard to find the time for every game that comes out. Untitled Goose Game, I actually downloaded it. That game I'm going to play very soon here. I don't know if I'd like it that much. It's a stealth game, and I'm really not big into stealth games, but maybe the humor of it will win me over. Maybe the simplicity of it will kind of win me over as well. But it looks like a game that could end up getting kind of frustrating to me. We'll see when I eventually play that. Code Vein. I might not play Code Vein. I played the demo. I didn't like it that much. Like a lot of these Souls clone type games, I don't know. The combat just didn't feel good to me. It was super like anime, which is not into really all that much. The environments and like the level design was pretty bland and just not that interesting to me. Actually, I didn't really like the beta actually at all. I don't know. Maybe I won't play Code Vein, but I don't know if that's one of those games. If it's cheap one day, maybe I'll play it. Concrete Genie I would have liked to play. I'm gonna play sometime. That looks like a fun little game, a short game that looks kind of fun. Doesn't look like amazing or anything, but Cold Steel 3. I'm not gonna play Cold Steel 3, but that's a game that's gonna be on a lot of people's game of the year list. A lot of people just love those games. I didn't like Cold Steel 1 that much. I didn't like it enough to want to play the second game, so I'm probably never going to play the third game. But I thought it was worth mentioning because I think that if you like turn-based JRPGs, you're probably going to like that game. I'm in the extreme minority for not liking those games. Luigi's Mansion 3 is a big one. I really wish I would have played Luigi's Mansion 3, but I kind of want to play the first two. I haven't played any of the Luigi's Mansion games, so I'd like to play the first two before I jump into this one. Something tells me I might not like them too much. They look a little slow, maybe a little dull, but I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong with that. I need to give it a chance. Maybe I'll like the more deliberate pace of those games. I'm pretty sure the first game is probably the slowest of them all, but it also looks like it could be a good co-op game to play with someone. Shenmue 3, I'm sure I'll play it someday when it's super cheap, but I don't know. Shenmue 1 I hated, and Shenmue 2 was okay. But then the fact that Shenmue 3 is like a cliffhanger again, and really I think he wants to do like 6 games to finish the story, like that's fucking bullshit. Like they're so lucky to even get a third game, and it's selling like shit. And then you have I don't know, you decide to like just do a cliffhanger again in the hopes that you'll be able to get another like 3 games out of it. Like that sucks. I really hate that. So that's really kind of lowered my interest in playing the game. And it looks very much like Shenmue. It's probably on par with Shenmue 2 from what I've seen, but I'll probably play it someday. Saga Scarlet Grace, I've heard it's actually really good. That game kind of came out of nowhere at the very end of the year. The Sega games have always been very weird and experimental. A lot of people hate them. A lot of people really like them. This one apparently is one of the best ones in years. Apparently the battle system in this game is amazing, this amazing battle system, and it's apparently a JRPG that cuts out a lot of the fluff. A lot of I don't know, the dungeons are very straightforward. A lot of it is menu driven, very very direct and to the point apparently. And apparently the writing is amazing. The translation's incredible. I think 8.4 did the localization on it. So that's another game that I'm definitely going to play at some point. Just obviously didn't have the time for it. I think it's a game that people have missed out on this year. Man, okay, we've got still a bunch more for the games I've missed here. Slay the Spire. I did play Slay the Spire a little bit. I played it on my friend's PC. I did a run through of it. I didn't finish it. I died, but that game's actually really cool. I'm not the biggest roguelike guy, but the card-based battle system in that game I think is actually really cool. But it's also one of those games I have fun. If I played it, I'd probably do a couple runs. I don't know how hard it is to beat that game, but I feel like it's one of those games that I'd probably beat it once and I wouldn't go back to it. I find it very hard to stick with roguelikes. I feel like it'd probably be the same with that game, but it's still a very, very cool game. I think it's on a lot of people's top 10 list, and for good reason. I think it's one of the more interesting and unique roguelikes to come out in a while. Wargroove, that's that cool indie Advanced Wars style game. Apparently it's quite good. Apparently it's really difficult. I'd like to play it. I'm sure I'll play it someday, but I just didn't really have the time for it. I think it came out at a bad time. There's a bunch of games that came out around the same time. Yoshi's Crafted World, I don't know. I'm probably not going to play that. It looks really boring. And again, it's fuck, man. Yoshi's Island is so goddamn good, and every single Yoshi game after has been such trash. So depressing what's happened to that series. Even though Crafted World is probably more similar to something like Kirby's Epic Yarn than it is the Yoshi's Island games. But it looks like, I don't know, it just doesn't look very fun to me, that game. Crackdown 3, I doubt I'm going to play, but I liked Crackdown 1 a lot when that came out. But apparently Crackdown 3 is just absolute garbage, so I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever play it. Days Gone, I guess I have to mention it. It's a game I missed, but I'm never going to play Days Gone. Days Gone is like everything I hate in video games. Zombie game, chasing trends, completely derivative, just takes everything from every other game and does it worse. A giant bloated open world with just a bunch of random shit for you to do. An uninteresting, unengaging main character and storyline. It's just, oh man, really cinematic. The dialogue's really terrible from what I've seen of it. Biker gangs, which is ugh. Everything about that game is just awful. I can guarantee you I would hate it. But I had to mention it here because a lot of people do like it. I don't know. Maybe I'm being hard. Maybe it's one of those games that seems like I would hate it. I just need to give it a chance. But I don't know. Everything about that game is so unappealing to me. It's kind of ridiculous. That game, I can't imagine the developers making that game and having any kind of passion for what they're doing with that. It's just so derivative and so oh my god, everything about it is just so it's triple A game, the game. It's I don't know, oh man, everything about that game just rubs me the wrong way. But anyways, that's my little Days Gone rant. Moving on. A Plague Tale apparently is a really cool stealth game. It's a stealth game though, and so I'm hesitant to play it. But apparently it's actually the art direction is really cool. And there's really cool environments for it, and it's very creepy. Apparently, it's got apparently good narrative to it. So I don't know. Maybe that game's actually good. Maybe I'll have to give that a shot sometime. Rage 2, I guess I have to mention. I don't know. The Rage 2 doesn't look that good. Rage 2 looks kind of dull. I've heard it's not that great either. So I don't know why I really listed it here. My friend Pedro looks like a cool indie game, this cool indie action game. I don't know why I didn't play that. I should have probably played that. That game looks so up my alley. I'm sure I'll play it sometime though. Judgment by the Yakuza team. Probably on a lot of people's top 10s. I've heard it's quite good. I do like that it's not Yakuza because I'm a little burnt out on Yakuza and those characters and those settings. This has got a similar setting, but it's a totally different it's the same universe but different characters. But I've heard there's a gazillion tailing missions and tailing missions are one of the worst things in any video game. It blows my mind they're still in fucking games. And yeah, that's kind of put me off from it. But I heard other people say it's not actually that bad. It's not as bad as it sounds, but I don't know. It's keeping me from want to play the game. But I'm sure I'm going to play it eventually because I really do like the Yakuza series a lot. And this looks pretty different. Ion Fury, I think that's one of those first-person shooters, like indie first-person shooters, but I'm one of those weird people that it's a PC game only right now, that I hate playing games on the mouse and keyboard. Even first-person shooters, which a lot of people argue is the ideal way to play them, I'd still much prefer a controller. I'm still much better with a controller. So I know, part of me is holding out for like a PS4 port or something, so I don't know. But yeah, I'm very strange in that way. Remnant from the Ashes is apparently like a pretty good Dark Souls style game, but it's got roguelike elements, and that part of it kind of turns me off a bit. But if it's really cheap, I'll probably play it someday, but it doesn't, I don't know, something about it looks kind of like off to me. I don't know if I would like that game that much. River City Girls looks like a fun little beat 'em up from Way Forward. I would have liked to have played that. I don't see that having a chance of making a top 10, but it does look pretty fun. And charming. The music's amazing from what I've heard. The music is like amazing in that game. Gears 5 was one of those weird big games that came out and no one gave a shit. I'll probably never play it, but I thought I'd mention it here. And then Borderlands 3 is the other one. I've never been like the biggest Borderlands guy, but they can be fun games to play with other people. I don't think there's really anybody that I have to play that game with though. But that's one of those big titles that came out this year that I just didn't get around to. So yeah, that's it for the games I missed. So finally, we'll leave off with the dishonorable mentions, games that I was either disappointed by or just didn't like. We'll start with AI, the Somnium Files, this is a very recent. I just finished this game like a couple days ago. Maybe one of the worst games I've played this year, actually, and which is strange because a lot of people love this game. A lot of people thought it was amazing. It's a Kotaro Uchikoshi game, the designer, the director behind the Zero Escape series. 999 and Virtue's Last Reward are two of my favorite games ever. Zero Time Dilemma was a massive disappointment. I liked it at the time, but the more I've kind of gotten away from it, the more I kind of hate it. I think it's just an extremely lackluster ending to the game, the series, and the puzzles even weren't that good compared to previous games. AI is probably worse than Zero Time Dilemma, actually. It's far more of a narrative-driven game than those. There's not puzzle rooms or anything. It's like a murder mystery game. You play as a detective, but you've got like the main gameplay hook behind it is these somniums, where you go into a person's mind essentially and kind of like unlock these like mental locks to kind of like figure out like hidden secrets that they're holding from you. The somnium, I think somniums as a mechanic, I don't think are engaging. I think they're kind of annoying. You have a 6-minute time limit for all of them, and it's just trial and error. You're basically interacting with different parts of the environment, and it uses up time. And a lot of the times, it's way too obtuse to figure out what is the right action to kind of progress through the somnium. It was very frustrating. Eventually, halfway through the game, I was just like, you know what, fuck this. Like, I'm just going to use a guide and try to get through these as quick as possible. And that rather than waste my time trying every single action, hoping I get the right one and not run out of time and have to redo the entire thing. So, I don't know, as a mechanic, I thought that was terrible, but the main thing I hated with the game is just, like, the main story itself is actually pretty decent. It wraps up nicely in a way that Zero Time Dilemma completely fails at, but the tone of this game is just horrible. It's just not for me. It's this murder mystery storyline where it doesn't take itself seriously at all, and the game's far better when it actually goes for emotional moments and the game actually kind of gets grim, which is very rare. Most of the time, the game's trying to be funny by being as perverted as possible. The main character in this game is just the biggest pervert, and it's in your face constantly. And there's a lot of stuff of like underage girls in here that's just disgusting, and it's just so tiring. All these attempts at humor based around the character being perverted. And it's just, there's all these stupid, over-the-top action sequences in the game that make no sense, and they're just over-the-top with their stupidity. And then right after that, you get like these grim like murder scenes. It just like, the tone just did not work for me whatsoever. I really didn't care for the writing. A lot of the characters are irritating in this game. I didn't like any of the characters really in this game. Like I think I didn't. I didn't like any of them really. Yeah, no, this game was a bummer. I really didn't care for it. I was really kind of just annoyed by it by the end. And then the ending is just like I don't know, the way it wraps up nicely, but then it ends with like well, I can't really spoil it, but it's not good. No, I really didn't care for the AI, the Somnium Files. I actually really don't see what people like are all crazy about this game for. Another disappointment from Uchikoshi, unfortunately. I don't know, man. It's such a bummer. Like Virtue's Last Reward was so fucking good. Like that game is like was still one of my favorite games like ever. It's just such a shame that he hasn't been able to live up to that game yet. But moving on, No More Heroes, Travis Strikes Again. That game was terrible. Just a huge departure from the previous No More Heroes games. It was a very bland, like top-down hack and slash game. It was very clunky, and the level design was just abysmal. The last level in that game was fucking terrible. This giant maze and just like a clusterfuck of like warp portals. It was impossible to know where you were going. Enemies would constantly respawn in the most annoying locations. It's one of the worst levels I've ever seen in a game. The last level in this one, like it's got some good humor and charm to it, like the previous No More Heroes games. But you can get that in those games, and those games actually have good gameplay to them and fun boss fights. And this is just like super simplistic and not fun at all. And I was playing co-op. I played co-op with a friend, and it still wasn't that good. Yeah, that game was just a disappointment. Like that, one of the worst games I've played this year. Actually, I really didn't like it. Actually, the Division 2. I got the platinum in this game, and it was one of the worst things ever. Like it took forever, and it was just so luck based. Division is your typical Ubisoft game. It's this bland open world game with a bunch of pointless things to do. It's a looter shooter where the loot just isn't interesting. The dark zones are just not fun, like at all. The missions are very bland. The story's terrible. The writing's bad. The gunplay is okay, but like it's bullet sponge enemies constantly. A lot of like glitches. It was a super glitchy game when I played. Like I ran into so many glitches in this game, and like the really kind of bad glitches where you get 30 minutes into a mission and then the AI would bug, and you couldn't actually complete the mission. You had to redo the entire thing. Yeah, I don't know. I Division 2. It had moments where it was kind of fun with friends, but I don't know. I regret playing that game for as long as I did. I don't know. I don't even know why I played it in the first place. It's a fucking Ubisoft game, but. I don't know. Yeah, Division 2 is not a great game. Blood and Truth was a bit of a disappointment. One of the VR games I played. A lot of people love this game, but I thought it was just clunky. Like, it just didn't feel good. Which is weird. You use the move controllers and you have guns in each hand as like a first-person shooter. But it just, I don't know, it didn't feel right to me. It never felt right. It felt off. Like, the aiming always felt off. Like, the movement was really weird. And the game was, like, way too difficult and demanding. I thought for how clunky the actual controls were. I got like maybe halfway through and I kind of gave up. I was just like, I don't know, I wasn't really having much fun with it. Outer Wilds. Now this is like I wouldn't say this is a disappointment. I'm gonna go back to this game. I probably only put like a couple hours into it. This game apparently is like one of the best games of the year. A lot of people just think this is like one of the best games ever. It's one of those games where it's very much about like the sense of discovery and exploration, which I'm totally into. But the ship controls drive me insane. Like I've played this game for 2 hours and I still can't get a handle on these controls. It's so frustrating. Like I always feel like I'm fighting the controls in this game, and it's completely getting in the way of my enjoyment. Like exploring these different planets and discovering these like civilizations and things like that. These alien civilizations. I don't know. It's just I don't know. The controls, just something about them. Just I can't get to terms with them. So this is why I'm gonna give the game like a few more hours. But I don't know. I'm a little disappointed by it so far, just because like I don't know. I guess I just suck at the controls apparently. Crash Team Racing. I was kind of really looking forward to this game, but I don't know. Like the story mode is okay. Like the racing itself, I guess, is fine, but. Man, the boss fights were just extremely frustrating in this game. Like, Crash Team Racing is way too fucking hard. Like, I don't know why that game is so difficult. Like, the boss fights are ridiculous. Like, I don't know, man. It's weird. What is with Crash games being so hard? Other than, like, Crash 3 and I guess most of 2. But the Crash 1 and Crash Team Racing are like really fucking hard, like way harder than I would have imagined. But yeah, Crash Team Racing, I enjoyed it for the most part, but it was kind of a one and done thing. I didn't ever feel like going back to it. But I don't know. Maybe this is arguable for disappointment. I don't know if it was like super disappointing, but I didn't love it as much as I was hoping to. I guess I still much prefer the Mario Kart games. Super Mario Maker 2, I bounced off of really fast compared to the first game. I loved the first game. I spent so much time making levels in that game. I think it was like number 2 on my Game of the Year list even for that year. But I don't know, Mario Maker 2, it just didn't do it for me. I guess I just had my fill with the first game. And this one just adds more, adds more, essentially. And I don't know, I guess it just didn't do it for me. But it's certainly not a bad game. If you liked Mario Maker, it's definitely a good game. But I don't really enjoy playing other people's levels because most of them are just bad. Not to say my levels are good either, but I mean, a lot of the online levels you'll play are just like terrible. But anyways, Wolfenstein Youngblood, that game's terrible. That game is, you know what? Wolfenstein Youngblood might be the worst game I played this year. I didn't even finish it. The person I was playing with. That game is just a weird-ass design decision after weird-ass design decision. I mean, first, the story and the characters are just, like, ugh. It's just, like, embarrassing, actually. Like, the dialogue is so cringy. Like, oh my god. Which is weird to say, because the Wolfenstein games before this, I actually liked the writing and the characters and the story, and the New Colossus and the previous one. But this one was just completely missed the mark. The gameplay, you have like this semi-open world with tons of backtracking. The enemies constantly respawn. They're damage sponges because this game wants to be an RPG. You gotta have weapon customization and leveling up and side quests in a Wolfenstein game. Why? It doesn't need this shit. Just really a slog of a game. The gunplay didn't feel good because it's similar to the previous games, but the fact that enemies die takes so long to kill is just irritating. It's got that annoying-ass alarm system that the previous games had, where it's so fucking easy to screw up. The slightest mistake, the alarm goes off, enemies constantly respawn, and it's just a clusterfuck. You die way too quickly like you do in the previous games as well. Yeah, not good. Wolfenstein Youngblood is really bad, actually. That might be the worst game I played this year, actually, the more I'm looking at it. Indivisible, the game was underwhelming. I didn't like it that much. I loved the beta that they first put out, but it's a weird game. It's a very weird game. It's not really an RPG. You level up and that's it. There's no equipment. There's no weapons to get. There's not much exploration in the game. It's Metroidvania, but the backtracking is kind of irritating. It's more of a platformer, really. It's got a bunch of really demanding platforming that can be good, but it can also be exhausting at times too. The traversal abilities are cool. I liked that, but the story and characters I didn't like. I didn't like the writing very much. The level design other than the platforming was kind of bland. The boss fights could be kind of annoying. The combat is way too easy. It's kind of hard in the beginning, but later it basically becomes a spam fest. You just spam your best attacks. There's like no depth to it whatsoever. There's no customization. There's no RPG elements, so it just gets really repetitive, really fast, and it's way too long too. That game, it took forever. The final boss is really bad. Yeah, I don't know. Indivisible didn't do much for me. It looks great. I really like the art direction in that game, but yeah, I don't know. I was kind of disappointed by Indivisible. I was really expecting to like it a lot more than I did based on that first beta that they did. And then the biggest disappointment this year, even though I still like the game, is Astral Chain. I have talked about this in one of my previous videos. I was really excited for that game. I thought it was going to be a Game of the Year contender for me, and I think it's one of Platinum's worst games, actually. The combat is very good. It's very good. It's not on the level of Bayonetta, or something like that, but still really enjoyable. I liked, I did like the combat, but it's got really lousy platforming sections, and the investigation parts of the game just completely ruin the pacing. The first half of that game is just a nightmare with its pacing. You get these amazing action scenes, and then there are these like horrible, slowly paced investigation sequences where you're just like trying to find a needle in a haystack, essentially, like talking to every NPC until you hope you find enough clues to move on. Just not good. The story is terrible. I didn't really enjoy that at all. It gets better in the second half, and it starts to become more of like an actual character action game with crazy set piece moments. They get rid of the investigation sequences after a certain point. They just kind of throw them away, which is excellent. You still have some really annoying platforming, but that's fine when they're throwing like amazing boss fights at you and you're sticking with that good combat. So I did eventually enjoy the game a little bit more. By the end of it, I was like, okay, I overall this is a good game, but I couldn't help but be disappointed overall, especially compared to like the hype I had going in. I don't know. I just think in a lot of ways it doesn't. I don't know. It tries all these different things. Like there's a lot of RPG elements to it too that aren't particularly well thought out. I don't know. It's one of those games that I think is just like it's ambitious in a lot of ways, but ultimately I just don't think it really works 100%. I think there's a lot of parts of it that just don't really kind of work together all that well, or they're just not that good, really. But yeah, that's it. This part of the video is super long. This video overall is way too long, but what are your guys' favorite games of the year? What have been some disappointments for you? Honorable mentions. What games did you miss out on? What did you think about the year overall? For me, yeah, one of my favorite years in a very long time. Maybe my favorite year of this decade, past decade actually. Like Disco Elysium and Death Stranding are two of my favorite games of all time. I think this might be the only year where two of the games I would rank that high, but I don't know. The year is still pretty new though, and I'm still high on the great games that came out this year. So maybe I'm kind of judging things a little bit too early. I probably want to wait a few years before we really start looking at this decade as what was the best years and those things like that. But certainly, I don't think it's near as terrible as people are talking about, and it's way better than last year. Like last year, it was nowhere near as good as this year. The variety of games was far greater this year. A lot more interesting games. If you only play AAA Western games, then maybe last year was better. But like, I don't know. Whatever. Anyways, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.